Welcome to our White House Fellows Open House introductory webinar to the White House Fellows Program, hosted by the White House Fellows Foundation and Association. My name is Margarita Colmenares, and I was a White House Fellow in 1991-92, and I was placed at the U.S. Department of Education, even though I have an engineering and science background. Today, you're going to meet a lot of fellow alumni, my colleagues, who will be here to answer questions for you. You should know, and by the way, I'm not able to see the PowerPoint, so I'm just going to tell you what, here we go. Thank you. So next slide, please. My co-host today is Janet Abrams. You will notice that I am in Sacramento on the West Coast, and Janet is all the way over on yes. And you're going to meet along the way other alumni later today who populate the rest of the country. Okay, next slide. So the White House Fellows Program, we can skip that one, is considered the nation's premier nonpartisan leadership and service opportunity. And I do want to emphasize the word service. This is a year where if you are selected, you will have the privilege of working for our government at the highest levels possible. It is not an internship. This is a high-level leadership development program. Next slide. The vision for creating the White House Fellows Program was to foster and strengthen future leaders, such as you who are listening in the audience, for the betterment of our communities and our nation. Next slide. And you should know that now we have over 800 White House Fellows since the program started. We have served continuously over 11 presidential administrations over 56 years. And this includes both Republican and Democrats, independents. It is a nonpartisan program, so that should not prevent you from applying no matter what year. We invite all of you in our audience today, all of you who are emerging leaders from all professions, walks of life, regions of our country, and communities to consider seriously this unparalleled opportunity. Next slide. Quick review of our agenda today. You are going to, by the time we're done, you will have an overview of the White House Fellows Program. You will get some insight into what the fellowship year looks like. You will understand more about the selection process as it goes along a continuum. And we're going to have a conversation, like I said earlier, with many of my esteemed colleagues from across America. And lastly, we're going to wrap up with resources that are available on our website or an email address where you can write in for more info. So now I'd like to start off with a short video that explains historically a little bit more about the program and gives you a good overview. So film, please.
What we're trying to do is to find here in this country, yes, here in the White House Fellow, a combination of an idealist with vision and a pragmatist with judgment.
This program goes back for 55 years and stretches across all departments of government and presidencies and administrations. And it's an incredible program, and I hope everyone listening will encourage others to apply, to learn more about this. It's something that everyone should know about, even though they may not be a fellow themselves. It's a rich part of the White House tradition, and we're very grateful to President Johnson and those around him for establishing this program.
Founded in 1964, this prestigious program puts the best and brightest physicians, military officers, academics, business leaders, and others to work in the highest levels of government. With direct access to the White House, cabinet secretaries, and world leaders. Many of its alumni have gone on to greater achievement. Colin Powell, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, Senator Sam Brownback, Paul Gigot of the Wall Street Journal, to name just a few.
I learned most of all how you champion good causes and how you stand up and fight causes that are not good, how you take risks for doing that which is right. And so for me, it was a very formative experience, one that I've treasured ever since.
Year after year, I've enjoyed working with the White House Fellows. Each and every one brings a variety of talents and energy into the government, and in many ways represents my best hopes for our future.
What kind of person do I think should apply for the program? I think would be someone who is committed to servant leadership, just as John Gardner would have said, someone who is ready to give back.
We expect a lot out of you. We expect you to go back to your units or your businesses or your universities or perhaps government agencies and lead, to set high standards, to set a good example, and to serve something greater than yourself. That's what the Fellows Program is all about.
I had this amazing fellowship year. I worked for the First Lady, Hillary Clinton at the time. I think what was interesting is in the beginning of the fellowship, you're sort of trying to find your way and you do everything. And then all of a sudden, by the midpoint of the year, someone comes up to you one day and says, "We have a speech for the First Lady tomorrow. Do you want to write it?" It's these sudden baptisms throughout the year that are wonderful. You feel like you're absolutely not prepared. You can't do it in some ways, and then all of a sudden, you're doing it. And when a year goes by, you can't believe it's over. I think in many ways, the year as a White House Fellow has shaped the rest of my life.
Thank you. So if you had some trouble with the audio and you would like to see that film again, it is posted at our website at www.whff.org. So you can watch it as many times as you want. Anyways, now to the best part of the program. Janet Abrams, I turn it off to you, and here it goes, West Coast to East Coast.
I caught it. Thank you, Margarita. Thanks so much. And hello to everyone who's joining us tonight. We had about 500 people register this evening from virtually every state in the union and representing many different career fields and educational backgrounds. So thank you for joining. I'd like to begin our program overview with a quick view of the core qualifications for becoming a White House Fellow. Applicants need to have a record of exceptional achievement early in career. They need to have demonstrated leadership ability in concrete ways and demonstrated potential for growth, which is very important. Certainly a commitment to public service, as you heard in the video, and the skills to succeed during the fellowship year when, as Margarita explained, you'll be working at the highest levels of government. The eligibility criteria, US citizens only, and there are many questions that come up about this, but the program is for US citizens. And so unfortunately for those who don't carry citizenship, you need not apply because you won't be able to be considered. Your undergraduate degree needs to be complete by the time of application, and no civilian federal employees are invited into the program. There are military officers who go into the program, but no civilian federal employees. It's a one-year paid position in Washington. The President's Commission on White House Fellowships oversees the program and the selection process. and the director of the commission, Rose Vela, Judge Rose Vela from Texas now. She manages the program and the selection process on behalf of the commission. And we're going to be joined in a moment by her deputy, Esteban Tapatillo. And they have recently put together the office in this new administration and are off and running. The program is nonpartisan, as Margarita mentioned. And during your year, you'll have a work assignment, a real serious work assignment in either a White House office or a cabinet department. The size of a fellowship class is between 11 and 19 individuals who come from a wide range of backgrounds. In each class, you'll see rich diversity. And the class comes together really several times a week to engage in educational activities that are planned by Rose Vela and Esteban. Are you there, Esteban?
I am here.
Hi, you want to say hi?
Absolutely.
Welcome. Hello.
Perfect.
Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. And just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone's interest in logging on. I've had the very fortunate opportunity to be in this current role as the deputy director of the program since June of this year. Had the privilege of being part of the interview process for this current class. I was just onboarded, and it was just such a talented group. I am very privileged to be in such wonderful company, and I look forward to recruiting the next class. So please apply, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate what you're doing on behalf of the fellowship. Thank you, Esteban.
So Janet, can I just step in and say
Yes.
one quick thing? I think when you were talking about the military applying, they don't necessarily have to be officers. It could be enlisted persons as well. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, thank you. Jen, if we could go forward. Thank you. This is an overview of the selection process. And Esteban, if you want to jump in and comment, please do. The application window opens in early November, and the application can be downloaded from the White House website. In January, the submissions are due, and the specific dates will be announced by the White House. In February and March, the written applications are reviewed and regional finalists are selected. Then there are panels across the country in various regions that interview these finalists, and selection is made after really about a 1.5 day thorough vetting of the regional finalists. It's a really fun experience, actually. After that process, national finalists are selected. And then in June, there is a selection weekend, which is an amazing experience in and of itself, incredible 4-day experience. And the new fellowship class is selected by the President's Commission the members of that commission do the interviewing over that selection weekend. The new fellowship class is selected by late June. And in July, the new soon-to-be fellows come back to Washington for a week of interviews to find their job placement. And then in September, the fellowship year begins. A little bit about the application, and there is a lot of detail on this on the White House Fellows Foundation and Association website. You'll be asked for a resume. You'll be asked for a number of recommendations from people who know you well from different parts of your life. And there are several essays that are word limited. I remember having to squeeze everything into a few hundred words as specified. You'll be asked to describe current employment, what contributions you're making there, what leadership roles you're taking, your most significant achievement, both professionally and then also in your service to community and country, your lifetime goals, and very important is the essay on your motivation for becoming a White House Fellow, and then your memorandum for the president. Everybody is asked to draft a memorandum on a topic of their choosing to, in this case, it would be President Biden, and you make recommendations to him about an issue that you outline. So that's the application. And we are now going to take a little look at some images of the fellowship year. You'll see here, the top left, a fellow meeting with the Attorney General, on a business trip. And the bottom right, another fellow working for Secretary Rumsfeld at the Pentagon. And then we have two different classes having fun together, top right on an aircraft carrier out in the ocean, and on another body of water on the Potomac, you see another class that is enjoying a boating outing with one of my classmates, Admiral Phil Cullum, who's in the middle there with the nice uniform with all the medals, and they're out on the Potomac enjoying a nice evening. A few more. We have a great colleague, Travis, in Washington State, who is pictured, he was in the picture there with George W. Bush out with President Bush's Peloton, his group of riding buddies. And there is Rod Lewis with the first dog, Bo Obama. And Rod is actually the chair of our national recruiting effort for the alumni community. And then there's Colin Powell, whom you heard on the video. You saw him with President Nixon. And a few great photos of the most recent class to whom we bid farewell in August, the class of 2020-21. They're a transition year class. They started during the Trump administration, and they completed several months in the Biden administration. And there you see them all masked up. And here are job placements that members of that class had. And this is actually not the exhaustive list, but this will give you an idea of where fellows are placed. And typically the fellow, let's say at Department of Commerce or Defense, would be reporting to the secretary or deputy secretary at that level. A few more images. The class, once they could travel, once everybody had their vaccines and they could travel, they started to travel a bit. You'll see them with Elon Musk down in Texas, deep in the heart of Texas there, talking about spaceships and electric cars, etc. Top right is a marvelous alum there on the front row in a white shirt, Brenda Berkman. She is an extremely well-regarded fire department of New York City veteran, a poet, and just a wonderful person. So people went to meet with her, and she's been a great advocate for women first responders and for those who went through the tragedy of 9/11. And then down below, you'll see in one of the many Zoom meetings that this class has had to have, top right corner is Nancy Pelosi, who has met with many classes of fellows. So that's very exciting. And Judge Rose Vela is in the top center. She is the director of the President's Commission, and with whom our deputy director, Esteban, works.
Janet, if I may, I wanted to mention one thing about, can you go back one slide? Brenda Berkman is also an artist. Not only is she has a long history with the fire department, but she's also a artist that has exhibited.
Yes, and oh, I know of her poetry. That's great. She's a multifaceted, amazing person. This is the class of 2021 kind of did a whirlwind of high-level meetings in their final weeks. They met at Kennebunkport with President George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush. You'll see there many smiles. It's a great shot. And they met with President Bill Clinton in New York. And I had the honor of working for President Clinton, and I know he loved the program. So now I would like to invite a number of Margaritas and my fellow alumni to the Hollywood Square setting here. If people would come occupy their squares. Our good friend, Jen Swanson, who's the communications director for our alumni group. She is managing all of this behind the magic curtain. So we thank you, Jen. So this is great. Hi, Kyle. Good to see you.
Thanks. Good to see you guys as well.
Where are you now, Kyle?
I am in Maryland. So I'm just not too far from Jackson Place. So
okay, great. And I say to the audience, Jackson Place is the street on which the White House Fellows office sits. So 712 Jackson Place is an address that's carved into our minds because that's the address. In the olden days, when you had to physically mail an application, you would read it over and over and over on the envelope to make sure you had the correct address, because heaven forbid that the application envelope wouldn't get to the right door. And we have Rob Leland. Hi, Rob. Where are you today?
I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Janet. Great to see you.
Terrific. Great to see you. Okay, well, others are going to join us. You get a sense from the map that we have several folks that will be hopping on from across the country. And there is John Saxon, a great alum from the super great state of Alabama. Hi, John. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Janet. Glad to be here.
Great. That's such an interesting backdrop. What is the painting?
It's by a Birmingham artist, and it's abstract. I'm in my law office, a turn of the century building with an exposed brick wall.
Very cool. Very cool. So as we're waiting for a few more folks to join, I wanted to start with Rob. Rob, I know that you are in a new role at Sandia National Laboratory. It's very exciting and very important that you're directing a climate change security center for Sandia. Could you speak a bit about how you feel the White House Fellowship helped develop you to be able to assume a leadership role as you have now?
Sure. Thank you, Janet. So I was a fellow in the great class of 1995-96, and I served at the Treasury Department, preempting the great class comment there, of course. And and as a technically trained person, the fellowship was a wonderful opportunity for me, not only to learn about how government worked from the inside, but also to broaden my skill set, my leadership skill set, through thinking deeply about policy and the political dynamics, et cetera. And I was very fortunate to work on a really critically important problem during the fellowship year, a huge modernization effort at the IRS that touched every taxpayer. And I was thrust into a very responsible position very quickly. And that really, just as several people said in the video, just sort of required me to step up in a way that I hadn't really had to do before. And I learned tremendously from that. It also prepared me to serve later in the government. At Sandia, I served as the lead for our computing effort, and then had the chance to serve at the White House about 5-6 years ago, working on national strategy for supercomputing in the country.
Wow.
Helping to launch a major program there. And I think that I would not have been successful but for the fellowship. I'm now reflecting on my role leading a new organization that's been formed to combat climate change. And the skills that I learned in terms of navigating the government, developing strategy with a national perspective, and the relationships that I developed with my class and with colleagues throughout the government, I think will prove critically important in this new role.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. And could you share with the audience your background, the background you had as you entered the fellowship?
Yes, so I was trained at a PhD in computational science and applied mathematics. And that was my principal background academically. It is a bit unusual for technical people to be included in the fellowship class, just I think by dint of the general interest of that community. But what I discovered when I served in government was that because there weren't very many technically trained people, I had a lot of interest from many different agencies in serving with them because they all had a technical problem that they thought would be quite important. And so, and I just want to say that I feel that often that we in the scientific and engineering community miss the opportunity to serve in government in a way that could be very impactful.
Very important. So. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'd like to ask John Saxon a question about how the fellowship has enabled you to serve both in your profession as a lawyer and in the community there. How's it enabled you to do more than you might have been able to do had you never had the opportunity of the fellowship? Because I know that you model, and I'm being honest, I'm not just flattering you, John. You modeled John Gardner's vision. John Gardner, our founder, who was shown briefly with Lyndon Johnson at the beginning of the video. He was the individual who recommended to President Johnson that a fellowship program be created. And he went on to become President Johnson's Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. And he spoke about his vision for fellows, yes, learning and serving during the fellowship year, but also going on and contributing to their professions in their home communities. So John, any thoughts you'd share?
Yeah, first, thank you. The White House Fellows year was the single best year of my life. And when you consider the job placement, the education and travel program, and the opportunity to get to know very well, in my case, it was 14 other class members who to this day are 40 years later are some of our dearest friends. It was without question the best year of my life. Now, John Gardner wanted us all to go back to our communities. And I did that. It just took me a little while. I went to Washington for 1 year. I stayed 10. I worked for 4 committees of the U.S. Senate and 2 Fortune 50 companies, but I eventually made my way back to Birmingham, Alabama. And what the Fellows Program does is it broadens your horizons. It allows you to understand that problems are complex, that they're trade-offs. One of the things I did, I worked in Vice President Mondale's office in the Carter White House, and I wrote speeches. The very first speech I wrote, he was giving in Southeast Ohio. And one of the hot issues at the time was the burning of high sulfur coal in utilities. And you had 3 problems. If you burn that coal, it polluted the air. You could not burn that coal and get coal that was in lower sulfur content, but then you'd put a bunch of coal miners out of work.
Right.
Or the utilities could put scrubbers on and clean the air, but then they would pass that cost on to fixed income people paying their power bill. And so at the age of 28, I learned there are trade-offs in life. You can't just do one thing. And that has been beneficial. One final quick example. One of the things I did, I served on Mondale's staff on the scheduling committee. And I remember sitting in the office of Dick Moe, who was his chief of staff, and Becky McGowan, his scheduler, sitting there with a stack of paper, imitations this high, when people wrote letters. And in early 78, she said, okay, Mondale's been invited to give the commencement address at Ohio State. I had no idea what went into something like that. So somebody would say, well, have we ever been to Ohio State? Whose congressional district is it in? Do we owe him or her anything? Do we have anything important we want to say about education? If so, is that the best place to say it? And so on and so on. And so you just learn how the world works. And you take that back to your university, your firm, to your military unit, as George W. Bush said, and it enables you to have a richer life and to contribute to your community, whether you ever work in government again or not.
Thank you. So well said. And
Janet, could I add something to the discussion? So I also have an engineering and science background, and I was placed at the U.S. Department of Education. I was working on environmental issues at a refinery in Los Angeles to reduce harmful emissions to the environment before I was selected as a fellow. But I was also leading a nonprofit related to STEM, to encouraging more minorities and women to enter the STEM field, which is the main reason I really wanted to be at the U.S. Department of Education, even though I was offered jobs at Energy and NASA and some places where you would expect an engineer to go. But I really enjoyed my time at education. And as it turns out, you know, sometimes you end up in the middle of history with these White House Fellows appointments. My year was the Rodney King year. And it just turned out that my principal, David Kearns, was named the co-chair of the economic recovery for Los Angeles. And so I witnessed and was part of a quick response.
Right? LA is your, Los Angeles.
Yeah, at the time it was my home. Yes, I came from LA. So serendipitously, this all came back to head, and I accompanied the deputy secretary and met many of the leaders in Los Angeles who at the time were working on this issue. But it was an unparalleled experience to witness federal government in action, responding quickly, cutting the red tape, if you will, to aid Los Angeles. And after I left the fellowship, I've still been involved in STEM issues. I helped start a Latino STEM organization. In the startup world, I can't tell you how many times I've used the alumni network to find out who else knows anything about the type of work that we're trying to do. So yes, there is nothing like it available. I'm talking about the fellowship. And if you are fortunate enough to get selected, I didn't get that.
Could you try again?
Let's see if someone.
I think Siri is trying to interrupt.
Okay, right, it's crazy. Thank you, Margarita. Kyle, you are the most recently minted fellow of our panel here. And I think it'd be great to hear where were you placed? I want to say to the audience, when we say where were you placed, it means, you know, where at what part of the White House or in what part of the cabinet were you invited to work for the year? And I wanted to ask you a bit about your class. Could you explain, give a sense of the makeup of the class, and perhaps share a special memory you might have of something y'all did together as part of the education program?
Sure. So maybe I'll handle the class question first, and then talk about my own experience. So I was part of the class of 2016-2017, which was the transition year. Our class had 16 fellows. I sort of did the math, and our average age was 34. I see that's sort of coming up a few times in some of the questions. All 16 of us had advanced degrees. We had 4 medical doctors, 3 PhDs, 4 lawyers, and a few MBAs or MPHs or MPPs. Within that group, we had 5 active duty military officers who all did a fantastic job representing their services. 6 of us were placed at the White House, and the rest at various agencies. And today we're all over. One is a member of Congress. 3 of us served or are continuing to serve as political appointees, either in the last administration or this administration. A couple are serving as executives, in one case, a CEO of a Fortune 1000 company. But I think, beyond that, I think, many of us remain really close, and maybe that's the most important thing. Every month we're holding a virtual get-together. A couple of months ago, when there was some break in the pandemic, we were able to get along. As for me, I was placed at the Justice Department in the Office of the Associate Attorney General. As I mentioned, I think the most interesting part of my experience was that it was a transition year, and that early 2017, that period right after the Obama administration ended, but before the Trump administration was able to get its team in place. I was one of the only people in the hallway, and that created opportunities to become involved in really interesting things for me, like human trafficking or PROMESA or federal Indian law. And those experiences allowed me to sort of then transition after the White House Fellowship into a political role in the administration. And I think, that professional opportunity was the opportunity of a lifetime. And, relevant to this conversation, I have certainly the White House Fellows Program to thank for starting me on that journey.
That's great. And could you speak a bit about your background coming to the program?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a lawyer. I'm a enrolled member of the Muncie, Delaware Nation. Started my legal career working as a staff attorney for an LSC-funded organization on the Navajo Nation. Spent some time working at a larger law firm in New York. Had been a military officer in a previous life, deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq. The usual things for my generation, and that's how I came to the program. I left working for about 5 years at an international law firm, and then migrated to the White House Fellows Program and was placed at the Justice Department.
Oh, that's great. So I have a question. Frank has joined us. Hi, Frank. I wanted to pose a question. Perhaps, Kyle, you would comment, and others of you who are on our panel. Is this program for real bipartisan? Or do you have to have, are you more likely to be chosen if you have connections with the presidential administration, either the party or the actual campaign organization? Is it nonpartisan / bipartisan in selection? And what's the experience during the year if a fellow has been selected, but perhaps has political views that might be at times at odds with the administration's?
So maybe I'll handle the first part of that question and then turn it over to someone else. I don't think that there was anyone that was overtly partisan prior to joining the fellowship. I think we were all doing our own thing, trying to make good by our communities, and being sort of good early to mid-career lawyers or doctors or otherwise. I think just personally, there were 2 Native Americans in my White House Fellows class, myself and Sharice Davids. She's a Democratic member of Congress from Kansas, and I was a political appointee in a Republican administration working on Indian affairs issues. And I think, the fact that we were in the same fellowship year and developed an incredibly close friendship and continue that friendship today speaks volumes of not only the importance of the fellowship, but the value of those bipartisan or nonpartisan sort of modes of connectivity that occur during the year.
So important. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on this question of whether the fellowship is political?
Janet, could you hear me well?
Yes. Hi, Frank. Welcome. Could you
thank you.
Let the folks know, I'm so glad to see you. let the folks know, where are you right now? Are you in New York?
Yeah, I'm a little bit north of New York City in the Westchester County. Happy to be joining you guys, class of 2014-15.
Yes.
My placement was with Homeland Security. So just to add a little bit to the question that was just asked, coming to the fellowship program from the military, one of the things that military officers have to engage with is timing of a career, whether you're on the enlisted side or on the officer side. And so I personally found the fellowship through a book of Colin Powell. And I know there was a previous question on the chat that was mentioned, when is the right time to apply to the program? So I found it in my early 20s, and I kind of just followed the program and eventually met different fellows. So I'm a great example of a person that really didn't have a choice on what political administration was there. And so I can tell you, going through the program myself, I thought it was absolutely bipartisan and a complete merit-based application process.
It's great to know. And John, I know you, thank you. And John, I know you served on the President's Commission on White House Fellowships, the commission that chose, let's say, moi and Rob, and
and Sanjay Gupta and a few others. Let me say, Janet, I do want to address this. I've been fortunate to serve on 3 different presidential commissions. The president of the association, the alumni group, each year serves when they're president on the commission. And in 1983-84, as a yellow dog Democrat from Alabama, I was president of the association and on the Reagan Commission. And then fortunately later I was on the Clinton Commission and then president again for reasons that aren't worth getting into during George W. Bush's term. But when I was on the Reagan Commission in 83-84, we had a finalist come through who was from Wyoming, a fine young man in his early 30s. He was the chairman of the Republican Party in Wyoming, which at that age of either party is a significant accomplishment. But he trotted out his Republican credentials in everything. And this is a Republican commission. And Jim Lynn was on that commission. Jim Lynn had been a partner at the Jones Day law firm, international law firm. He later in life was chairman of Aetna Insurance Company. He was director of Office of Management and Budget, and he was either secretary or deputy secretary of commerce, and I may have left something out. So he is a big time Republican. And the commission got into deliberations, and Jim Lynn said, no, we're not taking that guy. You can't come into this program and trot out your Republican credentials and expect to get selected.
Right.
And no, I won't take, well, that ended the discussion, and that fella didn't make it. He wanted to get it on his partisan credentials, and the commission of his own party said no. When I was on the commission in Democratic years, they had Republican commissioners. And then in, I think it was 02-03, I was on the George W. Bush presidency commission. And they had on Congressman or Senator Paul Simon from Illinois, a Democrat, Congresswoman Lindy Boggs from Louisiana, a Democrat. So it is a bipartisan, nonpartisan program. And I've seen it firsthand.
That's great to hear.
So Janet, I have a personal story to share on this topic.
Okay.
As John Saxon has said, I grew up a yellow dog Democrat, and my family was always the first one on the block to have a political sign for who we were going to vote for. And so when I was first tapped on the shoulder, it was during Bush Sr.'s year. And my immediate reaction was, no, I'm a Democrat. Why would I want to serve under a Republican president? But eventually, the 2 gentlemen that recruited me to the program were in fact Republican in the true nature, spirit of the program. And so I did take a closer look at what it was, and I realized, no, this is nonpartisan. And so I let go of that barrier that I had created for myself and decided to go ahead and apply. And I'm glad I did, because I shared with you earlier, I ended up at the US Department of Education. I went back to the private sector after the White House Fellowship, but then a year later, Clinton was elected, and I was invited to come back. And I served again as a political appointee at the US Department of Education in the same conference room in the same suite of offices.
Amazing.
And I was able to see a marked difference in what priorities were discussed at the table, so to speak. And for me, it was a real lesson in leadership, you know, whether Republican or Democrat, to see how different leaders approach problems that still persist to some extent, you know, today. So that's my story of I didn't want to at first, but then I realized this is truly a nonpartisan program.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. And we've been joined by David Iglesias, who was a member of the greatest class, the most extraordinary class of 1994-95. My classmate, David. David's teaching law and politics out at Wheaton College in Illinois. So it's great to see you out there in the Middle West. Perhaps, David, we've touched upon a few topics already I'm going to ask you to, a few of the topics that you and I had discussed might come up this evening. But I want to ask you to lead off on a little lightning round we might have on advice related to the selection process. Any advice that you would give members of the audience who come from all backgrounds and are dialing in, linking in from all over the country, advice on the written part of the application or the interviews? Why don't you start, and others on the panel could pop in with brief comments.
You bet. So thanks for that opportunity. Sweat the details. I mean, I probably did 50 drafts of my application. It was perfect. I had my English teacher mother read it to make sure there was no grammatical errors, no typos. This is back in '94 when there was no spell check. Right. So, yeah, I mean, really, I mean, my spell check was Margaret Geiger Iglesias, you know. So just take your time, do it right. Don't go over the limits. And I mean, people read it with a fine tooth comb. And I probably read several hundred over the past few years.
And would you comment on that to let the audience know about the alumni role in the selection process?
Right. So the biggest cut, so to speak, is from the initial application to regional finals. And, you know, White House Fellow alumni throughout the country will read each application. And it's really a great time to get together with classmates and other fellows from other classes and just go over applications. So by all means, spend time and do it right. They're looked at very carefully.
Thank you. Thank you. Rob, anything you'd like to share with the group?
Yes, I would add, Janet, to write about things that you know about, as opposed to what you think that the commission might want to hear. I was almost a member of the great class of 1994-95, but I didn't make the cut. And so I applied again the next year. And I think part of the story there for me was I had written an essay that I couldn't really defend very well because it wasn't authentic enough for me. And so and, you know, I'm sure there were other factors as well, and John could probably speak to that. But one of the lessons I felt that I learned was the importance of authenticity. And so I returned with a policy recommendation that was much more grounded for me personally. And I was much more effective, I think, than in speaking to it during the interviews.
A great point. And I'd like to note for the audience that a good number of White House Fellows applied multiple times. Once, Rob, you did, and the second time was the charm. Mm-hmm. And some people apply 3 times, maybe more, but don't give up if it doesn't work out the first time around. John, did you want to share something about the selection process?
Just want to add one thing. What Rob said about being authentic is important, and it's important in just about everything, every aspect of life. But one thing you need to remember, you're going to be thrust into an office, and Margarita talked about this, I alluded to it. I'm from Alabama. I worked for the Vice President of the United States, who was from Minnesota. He had a Minnesota mafia around him.
That's right.
And you can't just drop yourself down into that without being somebody that folks can trust and get along with. And so when I'm reading an application, either as an alum at an early stage of the reading or as a commissioner, one of the things I look at is, this may sound silly or corny, would I want to go have a beer with this guy or gal? You need to be interesting and collegial, because you're going to be spending a year with either 11, the smallest class, 19, a couple of classes, mine was 15, an intense year traveling together, having educational sessions, and you got to be able to get along with people. So that ability to fit into any crowd, any setting, any gathering needs to come through. I remember reading the application, and I was in our study at home, and my wife was at her desk nearby, and I just started cackling out loud. It was the application of Susie Becker, who made it, I think, in the first Clinton year. And Susie was an author. She wrote a book about something like everything I've ever learned in life I learned from my cat. And her application was absolutely a hoot. And my wife said, I thought you were reading Y.S. Fellows. I said, what are you laughing about? And I thought, I want to meet this lady.
Right.
And then later in life, she had a brain tumor. And then she wrote a book entitled something like, My Excuse is I had a brain tumor. What's your excuse?
Right.
Now, everybody doesn't have to have an application that's humorous. If you have a sense of humor, fine, as Rob said, be authentic. But make it come alive. Make people see you fitting into a class with 10 or 11, 15, 19 people for an intense year and working in an office where you came from nowhere and were plopped down at the Department of Labor.
Right. Kyle or Frank,
can I share a tip?
Suggestions? Excuse me, Margarita. Why don't you go ahead, Margarita, real quick? We're running close to time.
I had a tip about the application. When I applied, I did not have the good fortune of knowing any alumni. But what I did do is I sent my application to my 4 closest friends, and they looked it over, and inevitably they came back and they said, you forgot to mention this, you forgot to mention that. And so in the end, I ended up with a better story, a more well-rounded picture of who I was. And those same 4 friends also became my murder board, meaning that they ran me through mock interviews once I knew that I was going to go to the next level. So there are things initiatives that you can take, to make your application fit together better. And to Rob's point, my background was environmental engineering, but I wrote my policy paper on STEM, which is something I was passionate about, and I think it showed through.
That's great. Kyle or Frank?
The only thing I would add is, there's about 15, 16 fellows a year, and I think part of the goal that the commissioners have is to build a diverse class with unique experiences. And I think being authentic is really important, and diversity, doesn't necessarily mean, as was the case for me, working on the Navajo reservation, or as was the case with Charisse, leading a nonprofit on the Pine Ridge Reservation. There's uniqueness and diversity in all of these experiences, whether you may just not realize it, right? Like being from North Dakota is itself really unique. Being a district attorney in San Francisco, if everyone that you interact with every day is a district attorney or an ADA, you don't necessarily realize that's a really valuable experience that other people don't have. So I second everything that was said. Authenticity is really important, and realize that they're trying to build a diverse class and try to sort of position yourself with your best foot forward, leading with your strengths.
Yes, Frank.
Hi, I'm on the other side for everyone on the webinar, answering your questions on the chat. So lots of good questions out there. One of them actually dovetails on what we're talking about, which is how to stand out as an applicant. And obviously reinforcing everything that everyone has said here so far. I would actually submit that, viewing as many of these webinars and being able to get a sense of the different alum and their background gives you a good indication of, some of the characteristics that are preferred in the program. And I would also put on the chat thread that most of these webinars are on our YouTube channel. So there was one question in particular for any type of advice from a physician. So we have various webinars out there. I'm sure you could find a physician that's highlighted in one of them, and you could reach out for assistance.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I'm going to wrap up now because we have one more segment that's very important that Margarita is going to lead. And I thank my fellow fellows for a great conversation. I think your comments were very helpful, inspirational. And I wanted you in the audience to get a sense of how strong the community is, how rich and varied, but also how strong. And it's a joy to see my fellow alums in all parts of the country, and we get to come together once a year in a leadership conference in October. So even after the fellowship, being a White House Fellow is an adventure. And you've got a lot of buddies to go on that trip with you. So Margarita?
Hey, so to wrap up, we want to make sure that you know that we have resources available on our website. And again, that's the website address right there, WHFF.org. The application that Janet mentioned that you will actually download on November 1st, you can read ahead of time the questions that you will be asked on the application at our website. So we also have a list of frequently asked questions. And I really do invite you to go through that list. If after you've done so, and you have a particular question that has not been answered, either during this webinar or the FAQs, then please send us an email to recruit. I think that address is going to be coming up shortly, recruit@WHFF.org. The White House also has a page where you will actually go to apply for the fellowship with additional background information. And like I said earlier, the official application opens up November 1st. But we have plenty of information up for you now to get ready. Let's see, yeah, early November is usually when the application opens up, and it's typically due the first week in January. That date changes, so please pay attention to what is posted. And it is a strict deadline, I believe, including your letters as well. We've been asked that in the past, what if I don't have all my letters? I think you have to have everything in.
Everything in.
Yeah, at that time. So again, this is our email address to contact us if you still have lingering questions or you just want to be able to maybe connect with an alumni. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and shoot us an email at recruit@WHFF.org. One last thing, when we were viewing who registered tonight, we noticed that there are quite a number of folks who are not themselves candidates, but may know someone who could apply. We have resources available for you. If you so wish, we can send you either hard copies of recruiting trifold brochures, or we can make them available to you in digital form. We also are very good at supplying ads of any size. If you would like to place a PSA in your organization's newsletter promoting this opportunity. So again, thank you to everyone for participating tonight. Thank you, audience, for your valued time and for sharing tonight with us. I hope that you will take to heart what we've said and check out the opportunity. And if it's right for you, please apply.
Thanks, everyone. And I would just add to Margarita's important words that considering the opportunity seriously and thinking about your own life and how the fellowship might fit in and how you might fit into the fellowship and the community of fellows is itself an important educational experience and can be life-changing. Just the process of going through the application is for many people transformative, and they find new goals for themselves and new inspiration for serving more in their communities and in the country. So good luck to everyone. and consider this great opportunity. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.